It seems like everything in the entire world is connected these days. You can't buy a car or a refrigerator or a dishwasher, as we talked about during our field day presentations, without having it be smart and Wi-Fi connected and, frankly, stealing and selling your data. Jay, what do you think of this?
I think a lot about it in different terms. Maybe not always washing machines or large major household appliances, but I do think there will be increasing numbers of things that will be above our heads, possibly in orbit. I think there'll be increasing levels of intelligence in other mundane objects around us, whether that's part of infrastructure or SCADA. I also think that within the home, there will certainly be things. And there might be situations where the data being collected on our behalf with permission will make sense outside of the home as part of our personal taste graph. But to get there, you've probably got to see coordination, attention to privacy, a host of other geopolitical issues we probably don't have time to talk about, but yeah, those things.
Well, there are a lot of issues about this. I mean, we've discussed today, just today, the fact that everything seems to be trying to capitalize on our personal data, that it's almost impossible to buy a device of some classes that's not connected, that there's so much that AI is enabling that isn't necessarily positive. I feel like you're feeling a little optimistic about this world, but so convince me that I should be a little more optimistic.
So I do believe that there's going to be a function beyond what we say when we say STEM. We say STEM is very important: science, technology, engineering, mathematics. Mm-hmm. And my position would be is that if we add ethics and esteem is the acronym I'm going for, and so empathy is the other E. And so if you and I have strong empathy, and you're maybe a software developer, you would understand that my plight might not necessarily be your plight, but you understand that plight. And when you go to do something, because you can in software, you think about that. And maybe because you have a root in ethics, mm-hmm. as you apply science, technology, engineering, mathematics, we have a far more human to human beneficial outcome than just because we can, we did. Mm-hmm. And so I'm actually pretty bullish on our newer generation of engineers.
And this is something that you write about and talk about quite a lot, and you help companies learn how to do this too. How do you find that the company's reaction to this positive approach toward connectivity, how do you find that resonates with them?
It is a mixed message sometimes that they're getting. If they're public, you're graded by the quarter. How high is the number compared to the last time we measured the number that you're bonus by, or how the shareholders feel. But there's also growing interest in sustainability, the ability to feel that you are not part of setting our earth on fire, or contributing to the earth being set on fire. And I think there is an appetite for this, but it is a mixed message sometimes in how it's interpreted, because business is business, but bringing in the other elements around what supports the business, the very markets they sell into, is the market more sustainable? And by that being sustainable market, mean that their numbers actually can go up. And so it's kind of getting away from the how do I drop out cost, how do I increase top line revenue, to how do I improve the condition of the environment in which I'm selling around me. And by doing so, as they say, rising tide lifts all boats. And so you're still going to do growth of business, but can you do it ethically and sustainably? And I think that's really the two things you have to convey. There is an ethical element to it, and how do you codify that? And then the sustainable, growth part of it is it okay that this is the growth path, not the rocket hockey stick approach? And if they can buy into those two things, I think it can be an accepted message, but it is sometimes a very mixed message.
So you've worked at a number of enterprise companies in the past, and now you currently consult with enterprise companies on this topic. How do you get them past that focus on short-term returns in order to focus on these larger pictures?
I do try to appeal to their chief technology officer, or if they have an office of the CTO, we try to think in terms of the horizon. So there's the horizon maybe of right now, and then there's a horizon of maybe like 2 to 3 years out, and there maybe a longer term technology strategy or a strategic view of what the world might be. And I think if most organizations are going to have that, the question is how are we also weaving in these concepts that might be completely outside of just the purely technical domain that you're focused on, but thinking of it in terms of situational awareness. So if I had this perspective that brought in other elements outside of just the pure technology, and I recognize I'm going to operate in a market, that market is inside of an environment on today, currently the planet Earth, okay? Where could I expand if there were other opportunities maybe above planet Earth, surrounding planet Earth, rotating around planet Earth?
You mentioned that a couple of times.
Yeah.
Expand on that a little bit. Where does this above planet Earth opportunity?
Basically, I'm a telecom person by background, and so early telecom was about like point-to-point kind of communications, and then the internet happened and things, the Earth cooled, I think, before that. But after that, there was a question of, well, is the shortest distance between the 2 points on the terrestrial world, meaning facilities-based broadband providers, links from point A to point B, could you actually go up and back down again? And satellites, existed since we've had space programs and things up there where you could send a message up and get a message back down. But now with low Earth orbit and some of these other technologies, you could really come up with some interesting plays. Even if it's not even in a low Earth orbit, maybe it could be a dirigible, a so-called blimp. And so if you remember the Goodyear blimp, the iconic Goodyear blimp, there could be maybe smaller data centers that hover or rotate and go around cities for the periods of time. We have Cell on Wheels that goes out to these large events where you have a lot of people showing up with mobile cell phones. Why not take some of those same patterns and apply them up to other technology designs? Thinking not specifically about dragging fiber optics everywhere, but what if you just put the right amount of network in the right time and make it more mobile from an infrastructure point of view?
And I think that a lot of this kind of reflects a real kind of thinking outside the box perspective for it. But and maybe people don't really realize this. But for example, you're talking about low Earth orbit. Mm-hmm. I think it's easy for that to go right past people. Low Earth orbit versus conventional geostationary mm-hmm. satellite orbits. But we're talking an order of magnitude closer to us or more. Yeah. Maybe 2 orders of magnitude closer, mm-hmm. which is 2 orders of magnitude lower latency. Yeah. Which is really game changing when you're talking about connectivity and communications.
It is, and if you ever took a flight back in the early days of in-flight, air communications, where you could actually, and this is really dating me probably, you take the phone out the back of the head, piece mm-hmm. of the seat in front of you, and you can actually make a phone call. And so, clearly they weren't, dragging a wire down to the Earth. That was a radio technology down to the Earth.
They weren't dragging a wire behind the plane?
No, and it wasn't going up to the, the beyond the atmosphere and up into space. So the difference now is early in-flight Wi-Fi was actually talking to, basically the tops of what would look like cell towers. And now you can put satellite communications in these planes as well. And my point would be is that you could kind of mix those metaphors for how you would solution. And so the different horses for different courses. So I think that would be an example of, and how would you do that sustainably? Does it have to be an airliner that's pumping out, and consuming jet fuel? Or could that be an aeroglider? Could that be a dirigible? Could that be some other alternative? But you'd have a far more sustainable way to have an enduring communication link when you needed it, where you needed it.
This is one of the things that I love about, the tech industry is kind of meeting new people with new ideas. And about you in particular is because you seem to take things that some people would think of as a negative, and you kind of flip it around and look at it and think, well, there's positive over here on this side of it. And it's a really different perspective because, for example, in this conversation, we've talked about sort of like the internetification of everything. We've talked about the proliferation of AI. We've talked about, low Earth orbit satellites. We've talked about polluting jet fuel, and all of these things I think are widely viewed as negatives by consumers and by sort of the population at large in various ways. But of course they view the benefits as positives. And I think what you're saying, if I can be so bold as to suggest it sounds like what you're saying is, yes, if we can remediate the negatives, we can get the positives out of these things. Is that right?
It is. And while we have all those wonderful things flying around above our heads, what if through the powers of remote sensing, advanced analytics, we could actually see and understand gaseous emissions through the power of remote sensing, looking at the operational rigor that we're using when we implement these solutions? That's also a way for us to show literally the return on the investment.
It's incredible perspective. So Thank you for being part of the Tech Field Day community. Thank you for joining us here at AI Field Day, for example. I think you've provided a lot of perspective from the table. Tell our audience a little bit about where they can find you and continue this sort of conversation and get these perspectives from you.
Okay, so if you're interested in what I do, what I write about, just go to fudge.org. And depending on what your reading appetite is, I do a weekly, but I also have a daily. So you can go to hot.fudge.org, which is more of a hot take.
Oh, and then, of course, you have Fudge Sunday.
Well, Fudge Sunday is a Sunday compendium of all the daily hot takes that was hot fudge. But yes, so whether you like it daily, weekly, or a more periodic long-form blog basis, I got you covered. But it's all at fudge.org.
You know, honestly, I think I'd like a hot fudge sundae every single day.
Yes, absolutely.
That would be pretty nice. Well, thank you so much for joining us here with AI Field Day. Thanks for introducing yourself to our audience and sharing some of your perspective on the connected world and the positives and the negatives.